The forced cheerfulness of the restaurant was starting to make my teeth ache. It was my 42nd birthday, and my family was treating me to dinner. Treating was a loose term, of course. I knew that when the bill arrived, my mother would make a great show of fumbling for her purse, my father would suddenly become fascinated by a spot on the ceiling, and my brother Leo would announce he'd forgotten his wallet, and I, Emma, the ever-reliable, ever-responsible bedrock of the family, would sigh and pull out my card, just like I always did. It was a well-rehearsed play, and we all knew our parts. My husband, Mark, sitting beside me, squeezed my hand under the table. His thumb traced small, reassuring circles on my skin. He was the only one who saw the charade for what it was. He called it the Emma tax, the price of admission for having my family in my life. The tax had been getting progressively higher over the years. My daughter, Lily, who was 15 and possessed an unnerving perceptiveness, was sitting opposite me. She'd been quiet all evening, her eyes flitting from her grandparents to her uncle, a small frown line etched between her brows. Mom insisted on a family photo, thrusting her phone at a passing waiter. We all huddled together, the smiles painted on. As we squeezed in, Lily leaned her head close to mine, her hair tickling my cheek. Her voice was a ghost of a whisper, lost in the noise of the restaurant. "Don't react now, Mom," she breathed, her lips barely moving. "Just, when you get a chance, look at Grandma's phone. She left it on the counter when she went to the bathroom." I felt a jolt, a cold spike of adrenaline that cut right through the cloying atmosphere. I kept my smile plastered on my face for the flash of the camera, but my mind was racing. Look at her phone? Why? Lily pulled back, her expression carefully neutral, but her eyes, when they met mine for a split second, were wide and serious. I nodded almost imperceptibly. My mother returned to the table, completely oblivious, and scooped her phone off the kitchen pass-through counter where she'd left it, but it was too late. The seed had been planted. I didn't know what Lily had seen, but I knew my daughter. She wasn't one for drama. For her to say something so cryptic, so urgent, something was very, very wrong. That whisper, that one tiny sentence, was the pebble that started an avalanche. It was the moment the curtain was finally torn away, revealing the rotten, decaying stage set I had called my family for over 40 years. It was the beginning of the end. Before I continue the story, please subscribe. I need to reach 1,000 subscribers so I can keep bringing you stories like this every day. It's just one click for you, but it means a lot to me. To understand the chill that went down my spine in that restaurant, you have to understand my family's financial ecosystem. It wasn't an ecosystem, really. It was a parasite-host relationship, and I had been the designated host for 2 decades. It started small, as these things always do. I was 22, fresh out of college with my first real job and a steady paycheck. My brother, Leo, 3 years younger, was the artist, the dreamer, the one who couldn't be bothered with trivial things like budgets or responsibility. His car broke down, and he needed $500 for a new transmission. "You're so good with money, Em," my mom had cooed over the phone. "He'll pay you back as soon as his big project comes through." I was flattered. I was the responsible one, the one they could count on. I transferred the money without a second thought. The big project never materialized, and the $500 was never mentioned again. A year later, Leo decided the 9-to-5 world was crushing his soul. He needed to enroll in a special, very expensive photography course to find his true calling. My parents co-signed a loan, but then my dad had a minor health scare, a convenient bout of high blood pressure that required rest and a stress-free environment. The stress, apparently, was the loan repayment. "We're just so worried about your father," Mom would say, her voice trembling. "Could you just help with the payments for a few months? Just until he's back on his feet." A few months turned into the entire duration of the loan. I paid for Leo's artistic soul-searching, every single penny. I was the family's silent, unacknowledged benefactor. The Bank of Emma, as Mark later dubbed it, was officially open for business, though I was the only one making deposits. It became a pattern, an unspoken agreement. My successes were not my own. They were a communal resource. When I got a promotion, it meant I could help my parents with their suddenly leaky roof. When I received a bonus, it was perfect timing to cover Leo's security deposit on a new apartment. after he was evicted from his last one for, as he put it, creative differences with the landlord. Each time, I felt a familiar pang of resentment, a quiet, bitter pill I swallowed down with the justification that this is what family does. You help, you support, you show up. They were experts at framing their requests in the language of love and crisis, making it impossible to say no without seeming selfish and cold. You're the only one we can turn to, Emma. You've always been the strong one. Strength, I was beginning to learn, was just a pretty word for the one we can exploit without guilt. It was a quiet, creeping sickness in our dynamic, and that night in the restaurant, Lily's whisper felt like the first symptom of a disease that was about to become horribly, publicly visible. My husband, Mark, was the first person to put a name to the unease I'd felt for years. We met when I was 28, and for the first year of our relationship, I successfully shielded him from the full extent of my family's dysfunction. He'd hear the phone calls, of course. He'd see me, pale and stressed, transferring another $1,000 to cover one of Leo's unforeseeable emergencies. At first, he was sympathetic. "Your family seems to have a lot of bad luck," he'd say, rubbing my back. But Mark is an engineer. He's a man who believes in data, in patterns, in cause and effect. And after a while, he started to see the pattern. "It's not bad luck, Emma," he said one night, after I'd just gotten off a tearful phone call with my mother about their property taxes being unexpectedly high. "It's a system, and you're the system's power source." I was defensive at first. "They're my family, Mark. I have to help them." He didn't argue. He just nodded and said, "I know, but a system that only ever flows in one direction isn't a family. It's a pipeline." The metaphor stuck with me. A pipeline. I was the source, and they were the destination. My hard work, my savings, my future security were all being piped directly into their lives to patch up holes of their own making. The golden child dynamic was the most galling part of it all. Leo, my charming, irresponsible brother, was a celestial being in my parents' eyes. His failures were never his fault. He lost a job because his boss didn't appreciate his genius. He crashed his car because the sun was in his eyes. He was perpetually on the verge of his big break, a state of suspended potential that required constant financial infusions from me. My accomplishments, on the other hand, were treated as an expected resource. When Mark and I bought our first house, a modest starter home we had saved for meticulously, my parents' reaction was not pride, it was assessment. "Oh, this is lovely, dear," my mother had said, running a hand over the granite countertop. "With all this space, you'll have plenty of room for us to stay if we ever need to." It wasn't a question. It was a statement of presumed access. My father nodded, adding, "It's good you're doing so well, Emma. Family needs to be there for each other." The irony was so thick I could have choked on it. They saw my success not as a result of my work ethic or my sacrifices, but as a resource they were entitled to. Leo was the family's heart, its delicate, creative soul. I was its wallet. It was a role I had accepted for so long that I'd forgotten I had a choice. Mark's presence in my life was like a slow-acting antidote, gradually building my immunity to their poison. He never told me what to do, but he held up a mirror, and in it, I started to see the truth of the reflection. I wasn't the strong one. I was the exploited one. The dinner from hell finally ended. After I'd paid the benefactor, my mother acknowledged with a breezy, "Oh, thank you, darling, we'll get the next one." Knowing full well there would never be a next one they paid for, stood on the sidewalk for the drawn-out, awkward goodbyes. My mother, Carol, pulled me into a hug that felt more like an appraisal, her hands patting my back a little too firmly. "It was so lovely to celebrate with you, sweetie," she said, her voice dripping with manufactured warmth. I could feel Lily's eyes on me. I just smiled and nodded, a perfect porcelain doll of a daughter. As they finally piled into their car, with Leo at the wheel of a car I suspected I'd made at least 3 payments on, my father gave a final wave. "Don't be a stranger, Emma. We have some important things we need to discuss with you soon," he called out. A cold knot formed in my stomach. Important things, that was their code. It was the preamble to the ask, the soft launch of their next financial crisis. On the drive home, the silence in our car was heavy. Mark drove, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. Lily was in the back, pretending to look at her phone, but I knew she was listening. "So," Mark said finally, his voice carefully neutral, "what was that all about with Lily?" I took a deep breath, the stale restaurant air still clinging to me. "She told me to look at Grandma's phone," I said, the words feeling strange and dangerous in the quiet car. "She said she left it on the counter when she went to the bathroom." Mark glanced at me, his expression hardening with concern. "And did you?" "No, she came back and got it before I could," I admitted. "But Dad said they have something important to discuss with me soon. It's all connected, I can feel it." Lily spoke up from the back seat, her voice clear and steady. "I saw a group chat notification pop up on the screen," she said. "I only saw the title. It was called The Emma Project." The Emma Project. The words hung in the air, clinical and predatory. It sounded like a business proposal. It sounded like something you'd name a hostile takeover. My own family had a project, and I was the subject. Suddenly, all the little pieces clicked into place. The forced niceness at dinner, the vague warnings from my father, my mother's calculating hug. This wasn't just another request for a few $1,000s. This was something bigger, something they were planning, coordinating, conspiring. "A project," Mark repeated, his voice dangerously low. He looked at me, his eyes full of a grim understanding that mirrored my own. "Emma, this is a new level." He was right. For years, their manipulations had been opportunistic, reactive. A problem would arise, and they would turn to me. But this felt different. This felt premeditated. They weren't just taking advantage of a situation, they were creating one. The drive home felt like a descent. I was leaving the brightly lit, fake world of our family dinner and plunging into a dark, unknown territory. I was no longer just the family bank. I was a project, a target. And I had no idea what they had planned for me. We got home and the first thing I did was find Lily. She was in her room, sitting on her bed with her laptop, but she closed it as soon as I walked in. She had that look on her face, the one that was an exact copy of her father's, a mixture of worry and resolve. I sat next to her, the mattress dipping under my weight. "Okay," I said softly. "Tell me everything you saw. Don't leave anything out." Lily took a breath. "It wasn't much," she said. "Grandma put her phone face up on the pass, through counter, right next to our table. A message came in and the screen lit up. It was a banner notification from a group chat. I saw the name, The Emma Project, and I saw who was in it, Grandma, Grandpa, and Uncle Leo. And I saw the last message. It was from Leo." She paused, and I saw a flash of anger in her eyes. It was the protective anger of a child who sees their parent being hurt, and it was 1,000 times more motivating than any anger I had ever felt for myself. "What did it say?" I prompted. "It said, Phase 1 complete, the bait is set, she has no idea," and then it had a laughing emoji. The bait is set, I was the bait. My own birthday dinner was Phase 1 of some kind of calculated operation. The casual cruelty of it, the laughing emoji, sent a wave of nausea through me. They weren't just taking my money. They were mocking me. They were laughing at my generosity, at the love I thought I was showing them. It was all a game. Mark appeared in the doorway, leaning against the frame. He had heard everything. "Okay," he said, his voice calm and steady, the anchor I so desperately needed. "This is bad, but information is power. We need to know what this project is." My mind was a whirlwind of possibilities, each one more sickening than the last. Were they going to try to get me to co-sign a mortgage? Invest in one of Leo's doomed business ventures? The scale of their previous deceptions felt almost quaint by comparison. This was organized. "How?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Her phone is locked. I can't just ask to see it." This is where Mark's engineering brain kicked into high gear. "Your mom is not exactly a tech genius," he said, thinking aloud. "Is her phone new? Is it an iPhone? Does she back it up to the cloud?" The questions came rapid fire. I tried to follow his logic. "It's an iPhone, maybe a year or two old," I said. "She's always complaining about it. And yes, I think so. I helped her set up her iCloud account years ago on the old family iPad." My eyes widened as I said it. The old family iPad. It was sitting in a drawer in our home office, a relic from a few years back that we now let Lily use for drawing. I had set it up for my mum when she first got it, linking it to her Apple ID so she could see photos of Lily. She'd forgotten all about it when my dad bought her a new one, but I never unlinked the account. We looked at each other, Mark, Lily, and me. A silent, powerful understanding passed between us. If my mother's iMessage was synced to her iCloud account, and that account was still active on the old iPad, then we might not need her phone at all. We might have a direct window into the Emma project. We were no longer just a target, we were about to become spies. The old iPad felt like a Cold War artifact as Mark retrieved it from the office drawer. It was silver, a bit scratched, and smudged with Lily's fingerprints. For a moment, I felt a pang of guilt. This felt like a profound invasion of privacy, but then I remembered the words Lily had repeated. The bait is set, she has no idea. The laughing emoji. My guilt evaporated, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. This wasn't about snooping, this was about self-preservation. Mark plugged it in, and the screen flickered to life, showing a low battery symbol. We waited, the three of us huddled around the kitchen island in a tense silence as the device charged. It felt like waiting for a bomb to be defused, or armed. I wasn't sure which. After what felt like an eternity, the screen lit up with the familiar grid of apps. Mark's fingers flew across the screen, his brow furrowed in concentration. He opened the settings. "Okay, good," he murmured. "She's still logged in. Apple ID, carolrichards@email.com. That's her." He navigated to the iCloud settings, and my heart hammered against my ribs. He checked the sync options. Photos. Contacts. Calendars. And there it was, the little green toggle switched to on messages. "Got it," Mark said, his voice grim. He tapped the green and white message icon. For a second, nothing happened. The screen showed a spinning wheel as it synced with the cloud, pulling years of data from a server miles away. Then, the messages began to populate the screen. Old conversations from years ago, birthday wishes from distant relatives, appointment reminders, and then, at the very top of the list, was the one we were looking for. A group chat with 3 participants, Mom, Dad, and Leo, and the name, sitting there in stark digital clarity, the Emma Project. My hand instinctively went to my mouth. Seeing it for myself, not just hearing it from Lily, made it horrifyingly real. It was like finding a blueprint for your own demolition. Mark tapped on the chat. The screen filled with a river of blue and grey bubbles. Hundreds of them. It had been going on for months. "Okay," Mark said, taking a deep breath and looking at me. "Are you sure you want to see this? Once you read it, you can't unread it." I looked at Lily, who gave me a small, determined nod. Then I looked at Mark, my anchor, my partner in this nightmare. "I need to know," I said, my voice shaking but firm. "I need to know everything." Mark nodded. He turned the iPad towards me, and together we began to scroll. We started at the beginning, 4 months ago, and began our descent into the rabbit hole. We were about to learn the full, horrifying scope of my family's betrayal. The first messages in the Emma Project group chat were almost banal, a brainstorming session of greed. It started with my dad, Robert. "Car's making that noise again. The repair estimate is $2,000, we just don't have it." Leo's reply was instantaneous. "Ask Emma, she just got that big contract at work." My mother, Carol, was the strategist. "We can't just ask. We've asked too much lately. She's getting resistant. Mark is a bad influence on her. He makes her question things." Reading that felt like a punch to the gut. They saw my husband's love and support as a bad influence. They saw my growing self-respect as resistance. To them, my healthy boundaries were an obstacle to be overcome. They weren't parents. They were strategists figuring out how to breach an enemy's defenses. For weeks, they debated the best angle. Leo suggested he had a new can't-miss investment opportunity they could pitch to me. My dad thought maybe a home repair crisis, a classic from their playbook. But my mum shut them both down. "No, it has to be bigger this time. A one-time fix isn't enough. We need something sustainable. We need a retirement plan. A retirement plan." The words glowed on the screen, seething with a level of entitlement, so profound it almost seemed like parody. My life's work, my future, was not for me and my own family. It was their nest egg. It was their 401k. The idea, the truly monstrous, diabolical idea, came from Leo. What about Dad's health? The one thing Emma could never say no to. My father's reply was hesitant at first. I don't know, Leo. Faking an illness? That seems dark. But Leo was persuasive. It's not faking, it's exaggerating. You have high blood pressure, right? Your back hurts sometimes. We just connect the dots. We get a scary diagnosis. Something long-term. Something that requires expensive treatments insurance won't fully cover. Something that makes her feel so guilty, so responsible, that she'll have no choice but to set up a monthly transfer. For you. For your health. My mother was the one who sealed it. He's right, Robert. It's the perfect plan. She's a good daughter. Her love for you is her greatest weakness. We can use that. Use that. They were talking about my love for my father, as if it were a tool, a lever to pry open my bank account. They were weaponizing the most fundamental bond a child can have. I felt sick. Mark put his arm around me, pulling me close. I leaned into him, the warmth of his body, a stark contrast to the ice filling my veins. We scrolled further, watching in horrified silence as they fleshed out their conspiracy. They chose the disease, a rare, degenerative neurological disorder. It was perfect because the symptoms were vague and hard to disprove: chronic pain, memory fog, things my dad could easily fake. The level of detail in their planning was meticulous, a testament to the effort they were willing to expend on deceit, effort they never applied to their own lives. Leo, the family's resident slouch, had apparently found his true calling as a con artist. He had researched the disease extensively. The chat was filled with links to medical journals, patient support forums, and articles about symptoms. Okay, Dad, one of Leo's messages read, starting next week, you need to complain about dizzy spells. But not too often. Once on Monday, maybe again on Thursday. We need to build a credible history. My mother was in charge of the social engineering aspect. I'll start dropping hints to the extended family, she wrote. Just little things. Robert seems so tired lately. He had a bit of a fall, but he says he's fine. We need to lay the groundwork so when we tell Emma, it doesn't come out of nowhere. They were building a narrative. A web of lies designed to ensnare me. They were creating their own reality and were preparing to gaslight me into accepting it. The most chilling part was the discovery of a folder in my mum's linked cloud storage. The chat referenced it. It was labeled medical documents. Mark, with a few clicks, found it. Inside were files that made my blood run cold. They had downloaded templates for lab results, for doctors' letterheads, for prescription forms. They were using a cheap photo editing software to forge medical records. There was a fake MRI report showing abnormalities in the prefrontal cortex. There was a bogus blood test result with markers for inflammatory conditions circled in red. They had even created a fake doctor, a Dr. Alistair Finch, complete with a fictional clinic address and phone number. Leo had bought a burner phone with a new number to be the clinic's line, in case I ever tried to call. They had a script for whoever answered. Dr. Finch's office, how can I help you? It was a complete, self-contained universe of lies. I scrolled through the fake documents, my name appearing in the "in case of emergency" contact field. They were using my identity, my love, as part of their fiction. I looked at Mark, my face a mask of disbelief. They built an entire false reality, I whispered. An entire person, a doctor, a clinic, just to steal from me. Mark's face was grim. This isn't just about money anymore, Emma. This is criminal. Forgery, fraud. This is a felony. He was right. This had crossed a line from familial dysfunction into something much, much darker. This was a premeditated, long-term conspiracy. They had spent months on this. Months of planning, of scheming, of laughing behind my back. My birthday dinner, Phase 1, was the opening act of their play. The main performance, where they would sit me down with these forged documents and a look of deep sorrow, was yet to come. But now, I knew. I was no longer an unwitting member of the audience. I was backstage, reading their script, and I was about to rewrite the ending. As we delved deeper into the chat logs, a new, even more sinister layer of their plan revealed itself. They weren't just planning to deceive me, they were actively planning to isolate me. They saw my husband, Mark, as the primary obstacle to their success. There was an entire section of their conversation dedicated to the Mark problem. Leo wrote, "Mark is smart. He's not going to just accept this. He's going to ask questions. He's going to want to see the real doctors, the real bills." My mother's reply was chillingly pragmatic. "Then we need to neutralize Mark before we even start. We need to drive a wedge between them. We make him the bad guy." My father, who had initially seemed hesitant, was now fully on board. "How do we do that? They seem solid." Leo's suggestion was vile. "We start telling Emma that Mark is controlling, that he's trying to keep her from her family. We tell her we're worried about her. We say he's too involved in her finances, that it's not healthy. We plant seeds of doubt. Every time she talks to us, we subtly undermine him." They had scripts for this, too. My mum would say things like, "Mark is a wonderful man, Emma, but does he really understand the meaning of family? It feels like he's pulling you away from us." My dad would add, "We just want to make sure you're happy, sweetheart. You seem so stressed since he's been managing the money." They planned to use my love for them, to poison my love for my husband. It was psychological warfare. They were going to paint his prudence as control, his protection as isolation. The goal was to make me feel so guilty and confused that I would start to believe them, to see Mark's rational objections as proof of his lack of compassion. It was a classic abuser's tactic: isolate the victim from their support system. I looked over at Mark, who was reading the same messages, his jaw tight with a fury he was barely containing. He wasn't just an obstacle to them, he was the enemy. They were willing to destroy my marriage, the happiest and healthiest relationship of my life, to secure their financial future. The thought that they would even conceive of such a thing, let alone meticulously plan it, shattered the last vestiges of any lingering affection I had for them. There was no love there. Not for me, and certainly not for my family. We were just pawns in their game. The final, horrifying piece was a conversation about Lily. Leo wrote, "What about the kid?" "She's sharp, like Mark." My mother's response was the nail in the coffin of my denial. "Lily is a child. We just tell her grandpa is very sick and we all need to help. She loves her grandpa." We can manipulate a child. I had to put the iPad down. I stood up and walked to the window, my breath coming in ragged gasps. They were willing to emotionally manipulate my daughter. They were going to use her love for her grandfather as a weapon against her own mother. They weren't just targeting me anymore. They were targeting my child. That was it. That was the point of no return. The line had been crossed, erased, and then bombed from orbit. This wasn't about family, or money, or desperation. This was about a fundamental lack of humanity. They were predators, and my daughter and I were their prey. A cold, terrifying calm washed over me. The shock and the hurt receded, replaced by something hard and sharp. It was rage. A pure, righteous, and focused rage. They thought they were writing a tragedy where I was the victim. They had no idea I was about to turn it into a reckoning. Over the next few days, we lived a strange double life. On the surface, everything was normal. I answered my mother's calls, her voice full of a cloying sweetness that now made my skin crawl. "Just checking in, sweetie. How are you?" she'd ask. "Fine, Mom," I'd reply, my voice a carefully constructed monotone. "Just busy with work." Meanwhile, behind the scenes, my house had become a war room. Mark, Lily, and I were a team, united by a singular purpose: to gather every piece of evidence we could. Mark, my methodical engineer, created a secure, backed-up file of every message, every forged document, every incriminating photo from their cloud storage. We found pictures from a staycation they'd taken 2 months prior, claiming they were too broke to even fix their car. The photos showed them on a weekend trip to a fancy vineyard, laughing and raising glasses of expensive wine. The timestamp on the photos corresponded with a series of frantic texts I'd received from Leo about needing money for an emergency root canal. The root canal money had clearly paid for a nice Cabernet. Lily was our moral compass. When I would feel a flicker of doubt, a ghost of the guilt that had been programmed into me for 40 years, I would look at her. She would just give me a steady look, a silent reminder of what they had been willing to do to her, and my resolve would harden like steel. "They were going to lie to me about Grandpa being sick," she said one evening, her voice quiet but firm. "That's not what loving people do, Mom." From the mouth of a 15-year-old came the simple, devastating truth that had eluded me for decades. During one of her check-in calls, my mother started laying the groundwork, just as the chat logs had predicted. "Your father hasn't been himself lately," she sighed dramatically. "So tired all the time. He almost fell down the stairs yesterday. Oh, I probably shouldn't have said anything. I don't want to worry you." I played my part perfectly. "Oh no, that's awful," I said, my voice dripping with fake concern. "Is he going to see a doctor?" "Well, he's stubborn. You know how he is," she said. "But I think I'm going to insist. It's probably nothing, but you can never be too careful." It was like listening to actors read a script I had already memorized. I could predict her every word. It was nauseatingly effective. Had I not known the truth, I would have been sick with worry. I would have been primed and ready for the big reveal, ready to open my heart and my wallet. But knowing what I knew, the conversation was a grotesque piece of theatre. After I hung up, I looked at Mark. "Phase 2 has begun," I said, my voice devoid of emotion. "She's started the narrative." Mark nodded, his expression grim. "Let them," he said. "Let them build their stage. The bigger they build it, the harder it will be for them to deny it when we burn it to the ground." His words sent a shiver through me, but it wasn't one of fear, it was anticipation. They were walking into a trap of their own making, and I was the one who was about to spring it. The plan began to form in my mind, not a defensive reaction, but a proactive strategy. They wanted to have a meeting to discuss my father's health. Fine. We would have a meeting, but it would be on my turf, on my terms, and I would have a presentation of my own. The call came on a Tuesday morning. It was my father this time, his voice weak and shaky, a masterful performance. "Emma, honey," he began, his voice cracking on my name. "Your mother and I, we need to talk to you. Leo, too. It's about my health. We got some news from the doctor." There it was. The official invitation to my own execution. The curtain was about to rise on their final act. I took a breath, summoning every ounce of composure I had. "Oh, Dad, of course," I said, my voice a symphony of concern. "I've been so worried since Mom told me you weren't feeling well. What's going on?" "It's better if we tell you in person, sweetheart," he said, the manufactured pathos thick in his voice. "Can we come over this weekend? Saturday, maybe? It's important we're all together as a family." "Of course, Dad. Saturday is perfect," I said. "Why don't you come here? I'll make lunch." "We can be comfortable." There was a brief pause on the other end. I could almost hear the gears turning in his head, my mother whispering instructions in the background. My house was a better stage. It was neutral ground, but a place where I was in control. "That sounds lovely, Emma. Thank you. You've always been such a good daughter," he finished, laying it on as thick as possible. I hung up the phone and my hand was shaking, not with fear, but with a surge of raw adrenaline. I looked at Mark, who had been listening to my side of the conversation. "It's on," I said. "Saturday, high noon." Mark gave me a thin, determined smile. "Then we have work to do." The next 4 days were a blur of preparation. This wasn't just going to be a confrontation, it was going to be an intervention, but not for the reasons they thought. I was going to confront them with the truth in a way they could not deny, dismiss, or gaslight. Mark, the brilliant engineer, took the lead on the technical setup. He connected his laptop to the large flat-screen television in our living room. He created a simple, elegant presentation. It wasn't flashy. It didn't need to be. The content was explosive enough. The presentation had slides. The first slide was just a title, displayed in a clean, bold font, The Emma Project. The following slides contained screenshots of their most damning text messages, organized chronologically. He embedded the images of the forged medical documents, the fake lab results, the picture of Dr. Alistair Finch they had probably pulled from a stock photo website. He included the pictures of their vineyard, staycation, placing them right next to the texts from Leo begging for root canal money. Every slide was a nail in their coffin. While Mark handled the tech, I handled the emotional preparation. I spent hours thinking about what I wanted to say. I wrote down key points, not as a script, but as anchors to hold on to when the storm of their denials hit. I practiced saying the words no and never again. I role-played the conversation with Mark, him playing the part of my indignant mother, my blustering father, my manipulative brother. It was draining, but necessary. I was forging my own armor. Lily was our silent partner. She watched us, her presence a constant reminder of why we were doing this. She was the future they had tried to mortgage. She was the one I was protecting. On Friday night, everything was ready. The presentation was loaded. My notes were finalized. Our house was clean and tidy, the perfect, sterile environment for a surgical procedure. I was about to perform an amputation. I was going to cut the cancerous limb of my family out of my life, once and for all. I felt a strange sense of calm. The dread was gone, replaced by a clarity so sharp it felt like a physical object. I was no longer the victim in their play. I was the director, and I was ready for showtime. Saturday morning dawned bright and clear, a beautiful day for a demolition. The house was quiet. Lily had gone to a friend's house for the day. She trusted us to handle it, and I was grateful not to have her witness the ugliness that was sure to come. Mark and I moved with a quiet efficiency, like a bomb disposal team. He did one last check of the tech, ensuring the connection to the TV was seamless. Control sat on the coffee table, feeling less like a channel changer and more like a detonator. I set out a simple lunch, a platter of sandwiches, a bowl of salad, a final, absurd nod to normalcy before I shattered it forever. I thought about all the meals I'd served them, all the holidays I'd hosted, all the times I'd played the role of the happy, accommodating daughter and sister. This would be the last supper. At precisely 12 o'clock, the doorbell rang. I took a deep, steadying breath, looked at Mark, who gave me a firm, supportive nod, and went to open the door. There they were, my family. My mother, Carol, her face a mask of practiced sorrow. My father, Robert, leaning heavily on a cane I had never seen before, his expression pained and weary. It was a brilliant prop, I had to give them that. And Leo, standing slightly behind them, looking uncharacteristically solemn, the dutiful son. The sight of them, the sheer audacity of their performance, didn't trigger hurt or sadness anymore. It triggered a cold, clinical anger. "Hi," I said, my voice even. "Come on in." They shuffled into the living room, my father making a great show of easing himself onto the sofa with a pained groan. My mother fussed over him, plumping a cushion behind his back. Leo hovered nearby, the picture of concern. They were so committed to the bit. "Emma, thank you for having us." My mother began, her voice hushed. This is very difficult." "I'm sure it is," I said, my voice flat. I remained standing. So did Mark. It was a subtle power play. We were not settling in for a cozy chat. We were hosts of a formal proceeding. I let the silence hang in the air for a moment, letting them soak in the atmosphere. It wasn't the warm, empathetic environment they were expecting. The air was cool and tense. My father cleared his throat, gathering himself for the main speech. "Emma," he said, his voice trembling slightly. "There's no easy way to say this. I'm sick." "I'm so sorry to hear that," I replied, my voice betraying no emotion. "What did the doctor say?" This was their cue. My mother pulled a folder from her purse, the medical documents folder. My heart beat a steady, heavy rhythm in my chest. It's a neurological condition, sweetie," she said, her own eyes welling up with crocodile tears. "It's degenerative. The doctor, a specialist named Dr. Finch, he explained it all to us. The treatments are going to be very expensive, and insurance, well, you know how they are." They looked at me, their expressions a perfect blend of hope and despair. They were waiting for my reaction. They were waiting for the tears, the promises of help, the unconditional support of their good, reliable daughter. They were waiting for me to take the bait. I let the silence stretch for another beat. Then, I picked up the remote control from the coffee table. "That's a very interesting story," I said, my voice as cold and sharp as broken glass. "But I have a slightly different one to share." I pointed the remote at the television and pressed the power button. The screen flickered to life, bathing the room in a bright, unforgiving light. And there, in big, bold letters for all of them to see, was the title of my presentation, The Emma Project. The change in the room was instantaneous and absolute. It was as if a switch had been flipped, plunging us from their carefully constructed melodrama into a stark, silent horror film. The three of them froze, their faces a gallery of shock. The practiced sorrow on my mother's face dissolved into raw panic. My father's pained expression was replaced by a wide-eyed stare, his mouth slightly agape. He even forgot to lean on his prop cane. Leo's solemn mask dropped completely, revealing the craven coward underneath. He visibly flinched, as if he'd been struck. What is that?" my mother stammered, her voice a reedy whisper. She looked from the screen to me, her eyes darting around as if seeking an escape route. "I think you know what it is," I said calmly. I clicked the remote. The next slide appeared, a screenshot of the very first messages in their group chat. My dad's complaint about his car, Leo's suggestion to ask Emma, and my mother's chilling assessment that Mark was a bad influence, and I was becoming resistant. I read her words aloud, my voice steady and clear. "We can't just ask. We've asked too much lately. She's getting resistant." My mother flinched again, shaking her head in frantic denial. "No, you're twisting things." "That's not what I meant." "Really?" I said, my voice devoid of warmth. I clicked again. The next slide showed Leo's monstrous idea. "What about Dad's health?" The one thing Emma could never say no to. I let the words hang in the silent room. My father, Robert, finally found his voice. It wasn't the weak, shaky voice of a sick man. It was the blustering roar of a man who'd been caught. "What is this? Did you hack our phones? This is illegal. This is an invasion of our privacy." "Is it more illegal than conspiracy to commit fraud?" Mark interjected, his voice a low growl. He hadn't moved from his spot, a silent, imposing statue of judgment. I ignored my father's outburst and continued, a prosecutor presenting my case. Click. A slide with the links to the medical websites. Click. A slide with Leo's detailed instructions for my father on how to fake his symptoms. Complain about dizzy spells, but not too often. I looked at Leo. "You seem to have put a lot of thought into this, Leo. It's a shame you can't apply that same level of dedication to, say, holding a job." Leo paled, shrinking back into the sofa cushions. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. My mother rallied, shifting from denial to offense. "This is insane, Emma. You've taken private conversations, and you're taking them completely out of context. We were just brainstorming. It was a joke, a thought experiment. We would never actually do something like that." "A joke?" I repeated, my voice dangerously soft. I clicked the remote again. The screen filled with the image of the forged MRI report, the fake letterhead of Dr. Alistair Finch, the bogus lab results with their circled red markers. "Does this look like a joke to you, Mom? Did you joke your way through a photo editing program to create these? Was it a thought experiment when you bought a burner phone to impersonate a doctor's office?" The air was thick with their lies, their desperation. They were cornered animals, and they were starting to thrash. The carefully constructed facade of the loving, concerned family had been stripped away, revealing the greedy, manipulative core beneath. The show was over, and the trial had just begun. The denials grew more frantic, more absurd. They were throwing everything at the wall, hoping something would stick. "Those documents aren't real. You must have made them yourself to frame us," my father bellowed, his face turning a blotchy red. He had completely abandoned the sick man act. "You've always been so dramatic, Emma, making mountains out of molehills." This from the man who was leaning on a prop cane 30 seconds earlier. The hypocrisy was breathtaking. "I made them?" I asked, a humorless laugh escaping my lips. "So let me get this straight. In your version of reality, I hacked your private messages, discovered you were joking about a fake illness, and then decided to forge a mountain of medical evidence myself, just to make you look bad. Does that sound plausible to you?" My calm, logical dismantling of their lies seemed to enrage them further. They couldn't fight me on the facts, so they reverted to their oldest and most reliable weapon, emotional manipulation. "After everything we've done for you," my mother cried, her voice rising in a theatrical wail. "We raised you, we loved you, and this is how you repay us, by spying on us and turning on your own family. Repay you." I shot back, the cold calm in my voice finally cracking to reveal the white-hot rage beneath. Let's talk about repayment. Let's talk about the 20 years I've served as the First National Bank of Emma. Let's talk about Leo's college tuition, which I paid after he gambled his away. Let's talk about the down payment on your last car, the leaky roof that was actually a new patio, the countless emergencies that were nothing more than your complete and utter inability to live within your means. I took a step forward, my eyes locked on hers. You haven't done things for me. You have done things to me. You have used me. You have drained me. You have treated my love as a weakness and my success as your personal slush fund. And you have the audacity to talk about repayment. Silence. My words, full of 2 decades of repressed resentment, hung in the air like a toxic cloud. They had no answer for that. The truth was too stark, too undeniable. I clicked the remote one last time. A new image filled the screen. It was a photo of them from 2 months ago, the one from the vineyard. My mother and father, arms around each other, laughing, glasses of red wine held high. Next to it, I had placed a screenshot of the text from Leo. I'm desperate. The dentist won't do my root canal without payment up front. It's $1,500. Can you help me? I'm in so much pain. You look like you were in terrible pain there, Mom, Dad. I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. That must be some very effective wine-based anesthetic. My father just stared at the screen, his blustering defense finally crumbling. My mother crumpled. She buried her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking with what might have been real sobs this time. Not tears of sorrow, but tears of defeat. Leo just looked at the floor, the picture of shame. He was the architect of this disaster, and he couldn't even look me in the eye. They were broken. Their conspiracy, so carefully crafted in the shadows, had disintegrated under the harsh light of the truth. There was nowhere left for them to hide. The sobs from my mother were the only sound in the room for a long moment. They were ugly, guttural sounds, the cries of a gambler who had just lost everything on a final, desperate bet. My father sat beside her, deflated, all the fight gone out of him. He looked old and small. Leo hadn't moved, his gaze still fixed on a particularly interesting speck of dust on my floor. I felt nothing. No pity, no sympathy. The well of compassion I had offered them my entire life had finally run dry. It was a desert. So, I said, breaking the silence. My voice was quiet again, but it carried the weight of a final judgment. Now that we've all seen the presentation, let's talk about what happens next. My mother looked up, her face streaked with mascara. Emma, please, she whispered. We were desperate. We didn't know what else to do. We made a mistake, a terrible mistake. But we're still your family. No, I said, the single word cutting through her plea like a razor. We are not. Family doesn't do this. Family doesn't create a project to systematically deceive and defraud one of their own. Family doesn't plot to destroy a marriage for financial gain. Family doesn't plan to emotionally manipulate a child. You are not my family. You are 3 people I happen to share DNA with, and that biological connection is hereby terminated. I let that sink in, the finality of it. This wasn't a negotiation. It was a verdict. Mark stepped forward and placed a small stack of papers on the coffee table in front of them. This, he said, his voice firm and unwavering, is a detailed accounting of every single dollar Emma has given you over the past 20 years that was never repaid. We're not including gifts, like for birthdays or holidays. This is only the loans and emergencies. The top page showed the grand total in a large, bold font. It was a staggering number, well into 6 figures. It was a house. It was a retirement. It was my future, which they had consumed piece by piece. We are not asking for it back, I continued, seeing the flicker of panic in their eyes. Consider it my final severance package. It's the price I am willing to pay to have you out of my life. Forever. I walked over to the front door and opened it. The meeting is over, I said. I want you to take your things, including that cane, I said, looking pointedly at my father, and get out of my house. For a moment, no one moved. They were in shock, unable to process a reality where I was not their safety net, where I was not a doormat. Then, slowly, my father stood up. He didn't reach for the cane. He walked, defeated, towards the door. Leo followed, still not making eye contact. My mother was the last one. She stopped in front of me, her eyes pleading. "Emma, you can't do this," she begged. "Where will we go? What will we do?" "That sounds like the first agenda item for your next project," I said, my voice completely empty of feeling. "A project that does not involve me, my husband, or my daughter in any way. Now get out." She stared at me, searching my face for any sign of the old Emma, the one who would fold, the one who would fix it. She found nothing. She turned and walked out the door, and I closed it softly behind her. The click of the latch was the most satisfying sound I had ever heard. In the silence of the empty house, I stood with my back against the closed door, the wood cool against my shoulders. Mark came and wrapped his arms around me. I didn't cry. I didn't feel relief, not yet. I just felt quiet. The constant, low-grade hum of anxiety that had been the background noise of my entire adult life had suddenly stopped. The silence was deafening. "You did it," Mark whispered into my hair. "I'm so proud of you." I leaned back into him, letting his strength hold me up. "We did it," I corrected him. "I couldn't have done this without you and Lily." The aftermath began almost immediately. About an hour after they left, my phone started buzzing. It was Leo. I looked at the screen and pressed decline. He called back. Decline. A text message appeared. "Emma, we need to talk. Mom is a mess." "You're being cruel." I deleted it without a reply. Then came my mother, a string of frantic, rambling voicemails. The first was tearful, full of apologies and declarations of love. The second was angry, accusing me of tearing the family apart. The third was desperate, a litany of their financial woes, as if trying one last time to trigger my ingrained sense of responsibility. I listened to the first few seconds of each before deleting them. Their words had no power over me anymore. They were just noise. The next day, the flying monkeys were deployed. My Aunt Carol, my mother's sister, called. "Emma dear, your mother is beside herself," she began, her voice syrupy with concern. "She told me there was a terrible misunderstanding. Whatever it is, you need to forgive them. They're your parents." "Aunt Carol," I said, my voice polite but firm. "With all due respect, you have absolutely no idea what you're talking about. This is a private matter between me and them. I'm asking you to stay out of it." She was taken aback by my directness. "Well, I never." "There's no need to be rude." "There's also no need for you to be calling me on their behalf," I countered. "Goodbye." I hung up. It felt incredible. For the first time, I was defending my own boundaries against the extended family they had always used as leverage. Mark and I made a decision that evening. We went to our phone provider's store and changed our numbers. It was a simple, practical step, but it felt monumental. We were cutting the lines of communication they had abused for so long. We blocked them on every social media platform. We blocked their emails. We created a digital fortress around our family, the real family, me, Mark, and Lily. The final step was the most formal. On Mark's advice, I had a lawyer draft a simple, clear cease and desist letter. It didn't threaten legal action over the fraud. I had no desire for a protracted court battle. All I wanted was peace. The letter stated in unambiguous legal terms that they were to have no further contact with me, my husband, or my daughter by any means, direct or indirect. It outlined that any attempt to do so would be considered harassment. I sent a copy to each of them via certified mail. It was a cold, impersonal act, and it was exactly what was needed. It was the formal, legal end to an emotional war I had been fighting my whole life. The house was so peaceful that week. It was a peace I hadn't realized was possible. It was the absence of dread, the absence of waiting for the next phone call, the next manufactured crisis. It was just stillness. And in that stillness, I finally began to heal. A month passed. The silence from their end was absolute. The cease and desist letter had apparently worked. The silence was a balm, a cool cloth on a fevered brow. The tension that I used to carry in my shoulders, a constant, knotted ache, began to release. I slept through the night without waking up in a panic about some imagined financial catastrophe befalling them. I found myself smiling more, laughing at Mark's dumb jokes, being truly present with Lily. It was like I'd been living my life in a room with a loud, broken air conditioner, and someone had finally shut it off. I hadn't even realized how much energy it was taking just to exist with that noise. One Saturday, Mark came into the kitchen while I was making breakfast. He was holding his tablet, an odd expression on his face. "You might want to see this," he said. He showed me the screen. It was a post from a distant cousin on social media, someone I hadn't spoken to in years. The cousin had shared a GoFundMe page. The title of the page was, "Help the Richards family in their time of need." My blood went cold. I took the tablet from him. The page had been set up by Leo. It featured a photo of my parents, looking sad and downtrodden. The accompanying text was a masterpiece of fiction. It spoke of a sudden, unexpected financial ruin caused by unforeseen medical costs and a devastating family betrayal. It didn't name me, but it didn't have to. It was a vague, tear-jerking narrative designed to elicit sympathy and, more importantly, money. It painted them as victims, noble figures struggling against a cruel world and an even crueler, unnamed daughter. "Our beloved father, Robert, is battling a serious illness," Leo wrote. And their retirement savings were wiped out by a trusted family member. The audacity was stunning. They couldn't get money from me, so they had turned to crowdfunding, using the same lies they had tried to use on me. I scrolled down. They had raised $175. Out of a $10,000 goal. Most of the donations were small, from friends of theirs I vaguely knew. But then I saw the comments section. The first few were the expected messages of sympathy. "So sorry to hear this, Carol. Praying for you." But then, the tide turned. My Aunt Carol, the one I had shut down on the phone, had apparently done some digging of her own. Her comment was scathing. "Carol, what illness is Robert battling? I just saw him last week carrying 2 40-pound bags of mulch in his yard. He looked healthier than my husband." This sounds very suspicious. Another comment from a family friend. "Wiped out by a trusted family member. I thought Emma was always so generous with you all." "This doesn't add up." Someone else had chimed in. "Is this the same illness that required that expensive wine-tasting trip a few months ago?" They had been exposed. Their web of lies, so carefully constructed for me, was too flimsy to stand up to public scrutiny. They had overplayed their hand, and their own community was calling them out. The GoFundMe page was a public monument to their greed and desperation, and it was failing spectacularly. I should have felt angry, but I didn't. I just felt a profound sense of pity, and an even more profound sense of vindication. Their lies could only thrive in the dark, in the closed-off system they had created with me. In the light of day, they withered and died. I handed the tablet back to Mark and started to laugh. It was a real, genuine laugh, bubbling up from a place of pure, unadulterated freedom. They were no longer my problem. They were just a sad public spectacle, and I was free. The GoFundMe page was taken down less than 48 hours after it went up, likely due to a combination of public humiliation and the platform's own fraud policies. I imagine the frantic phone calls between my mother, father, and Leo as their latest scheme imploded. For the first time, the thought of their chaos brought me a sense of detached amusement rather than a knot of anxiety. Their circus had finally left town, and my life was the quiet, peaceful field left behind. The true measure of my newfound freedom wasn't in the dramatic confrontations, but in the small, everyday moments. It was in checking my bank account, and knowing that my money was my own. It was planning a vacation with Mark and Lilia, a real one, to a beach resort in Mexico without having to mentally budget for a phantom family emergency that was sure to pop up the week before we were set to leave. It was the simple, unadulterated joy of knowing that my phone would not ring with a number that brought a wave of dread. The biggest change was in my relationship with my own small family. Without the constant drain of my parents and brother, I had so much more energy to give to Mark and Lily. Our evenings became more relaxed, our conversations deeper. We had always been a strong unit, but the removal of the external threat allowed us to flourish in a way I hadn't realized was possible. One afternoon, Lily came home from school, looking troubled. She sat down at the kitchen counter where I was paying me bills, only my bills. "A girl at school was complaining about her older sister today," she said. "She said her sister is so selfish because she won't co-sign a car loan for her." I stopped what I was doing and gave her my full attention. "What did you say?" I asked. "Nothing," Lily said, shrugging. "But I thought about it. And I thought about Grandma and Grandpa and Uncle Leo, and I realized that girl was the one being selfish, not her sister. She looked at me, her young face so full of wisdom. "You taught me that, Mom. You showed me that family doesn't mean you let people use you. It means you protect each other, and sometimes protecting yourself is the most important thing." Her words were a gift. They were validation from the person whose opinion mattered most to me in the world. All the pain, all the drama, all the gut-wrenching decisions of the past few months crystallized into a single shining purpose in that moment. I had not just saved myself, I had broken a generational cycle of dysfunction. I had taught my daughter that her value was not in what she could provide for others, but in who she was. I had shown her that she had the right to say no, to set boundaries, and to walk away from people who did not respect them, no matter who they were. That lesson was worth more than every single dollar they had ever taken from me. It was a legacy of strength, not of servitude. We went to Mexico that summer. As I sat on a lounge chair, watching Mark and Lily laughing as they splashed in the turquoise water, I felt a sense of peace so profound it was almost overwhelming. The sun was warm on my skin, the sound of the waves was a gentle rhythm, and my world, for the first time in my memory, was completely and utterly my own. Life settled into a new, peaceful normal. The seasons changed. We celebrated birthdays and holidays in our own way, on our own terms. They were quiet, joyful affairs, free from the tension and performative affection that had defined every family gathering of my past. There were no more passive-aggressive comments, no more veiled requests for money, no more emotional landmines hidden under the guise of celebration. It was just nice. The quiet was occasionally punctuated by small echoes from the world I had left behind. About a year after the confrontation, I ran into a former neighbor of my parents at the grocery store. She was a kind woman who had always sent a Christmas card. She looked at me with a mixture of pity and curiosity. "Emma dear, how are you?" she asked, her voice hushed. "I heard about everything. Your poor mother tells me they had to sell the house." I felt a brief phantom pang of the old guilt. Sell the house? The house I grew up in? Then I remembered the lies, the manipulation, the Emma project. The pang vanished. "They did?" I asked, my voice neutral. I hadn't heard. "Yes," she continued, warming to her gossip. "They're renting a small apartment now, over by the highway. Leo moved in with them. I guess it's been very difficult. Robert's health, you know." I just nodded, a non-committal expression on my face. "Well, it was good to see you," I said, pushing my cart past her. I didn't offer any explanation. I didn't defend myself. I didn't engage. Their narrative was their own to manage. I was no longer a character in it. Driving home, I thought about them in a small apartment, the three of them, stewing in their own self-made misery. My father, with his fake illness and his real resentment. My mother, with her lost status and her broken schemes. And Leo, the golden child, now in his late 30s, living with his parents, his big break never having materialized. There was a part of me, a cold, hard part I didn't know I had before all this, that thought, good. They had created a closed system of dysfunction, and now they were the only ones left in it. They had to rely on each other, the three people who had proven themselves to be the most unreliable people on earth. It was a perfect, almost poetic form of justice. I realized then that my vindication wasn't about seeing them punished. It was about seeing them face the natural consequences of their own actions, without me there to shield them. For their entire lives, I had been their buffer against reality. I had absorbed the financial impacts of their poor decisions, soothed their egos, and maintained the fiction of their competence. By removing myself from the equation, I had simply allowed reality to finally assert itself. They hadn't just lost their bank, they had lost their primary enabler. Without me, the whole rotten structure they had built came crashing down, and I was standing clear, watching from a safe distance, finally at peace. The quiet in my car was no longer the absence of dread, but the presence of serenity. I was the architect of my own life now, and the foundation was solid. Years have passed now. Lily is in college, studying to be a social worker, a choice that I know was influenced by what she witnessed. She is a strong, compassionate, and fiercely independent young woman with an unshakable sense of her own worth. She sets boundaries with the ease of someone who was taught their importance from a young age. She is everything I hope to be when I grow up. Mark and I are closer than ever. Free from the constant stress my family created, our marriage has been able to breathe and deepen. We are true partners, navigating life's real challenges together, a team fortified by trust and mutual respect. My life is full, not with drama and obligation, but with genuine love, meaningful work, and the quiet satisfaction of a well-lived day. I never heard from them directly again. The lawyer's letter was the final word. Through the family grapevine, I hear snippets. My father's illness miraculously vanished once it was no longer financially useful. They struggle, moving from one small apartment to another, with Leo still in tow. They tell a story to anyone who will listen about their ungrateful, heartless daughter who abandoned them in their time of need. Some people might even believe them, but it doesn't matter. Their story has no power over me anymore. It's just noise, happening somewhere far away. I used to think that cutting them off was the most dramatic, brutal thing I could have done. I wrestled with the idea that I was the one who destroyed my family. But I've come to understand that I didn't destroy it. I just stopped holding up the crumbling facade. I revealed what was already broken. The family they wanted, the one where I was, a silent, smiling source of endless funds and support, was a fiction they created. My only crime was refusing to live in their fantasy world any longer. I chose reality. I chose my husband. I chose my daughter. I chose myself. The peace I have in my life today is the direct result of that one, difficult, world-shattering decision. It was the hardest thing I've ever had to do, and it was the best gift I have ever given myself. They tried to build their future on the foundation of my ruin, using my love as their primary tool of destruction. So, I have to ask, and I truly want to know what you think. After all the lies, the conspiracy, and the willingness to sacrifice my marriage and my daughter's well-being for their greed, did I go too far by cutting them out completely, or not far enough?